Hey, everybody. Hope you're doing well today. Let's take a look at evaluating monetary policy, and we're going to break it down between the strengths and weaknesses of a government using the tool of monetary policy to manage the economy. Let's take a look. So, the strengths of monetary policy, the first thing that I just want to point out is it's actually really relatively quick to implement a monetary policy, and that's because it doesn't have to go through a cumbersome political process that often takes up time in order for things to be implemented. It can be a quick decision by a central bank that immediately changes in the marketplace, which brings us to the next thing, which is central bank independence. And this was talked about previously, but you need to think about that the fact that the bank, a central bank, is usually independent from the government. It means that the bank can more easily make decisions that are in the best interest of the long-term, like, life of the economy, right? It can exercise more freedom in pursuing policies that, while in the short run might not be particularly popular, but in the long run will lead to steadying the economy or stabilizing the economy or keeping it stable, I guess. The second thing is there really are very few political constraints, right? Even if a central bank is not independent, monetary policy does not have the same political pressures on it as fiscal policy, because you're not going to have to cut government spending on particular programs. You're not going to have to cut education or cut healthcare in order to stimulate the economy. So the fact that there are very few political constraints is good. Plus, the phenomenon of crowding out does not happen, because which will lead to, crowding out is a situation where they could lead to higher interest rates, which would be due to expansionary fiscal policy, which would crowd out or cancel out any sort of incentive of businesses to invest in the economy because the interest rates will have gone up. But this doesn't happen with fiscal policy. I'm sorry, it doesn't happen with monetary policy. And the last thing is that the ability of the central bank to adjust interest rates in small steps or incrementally. And this is a really important thing because interest rates can be adjusted in very, very small little steps, and that making monetary policy better than fiscal policy to fine-tune the economy. Right? But it has to be stressed that there's limitations to this. And the U.S. government is toying with this right now. And it's trying to figure out, like, what is an effective interest rate? Because if the interest rates go up, it sends a signal to the markets that, like, ooh, things are kind of heating up. And ultimately, maybe there's going to be a downturn in the economy. So that's why the Federal Reserve in the United States, in this case, would increase interest rates to sort of make money more expensive and slow down growth, which means that growth is going too fast, which means eventually it's going to slow down. And so it sends these signals to the market. But ultimately, that's good because you don't have these huge fluctuations that can lead to a large recession. So now let's take a look at the weaknesses of monetary policy. And the number one thing is time lags. And unlike fiscal policy, monetary policy can be implemented and changed according to the perceived needs fairly quickly. But the thing is that, like fiscal policy, it remains subject to time lags, meaning that there's a lag of time before the central bank or the government would be able to recognize a particular problem. It could be several months before they realize the impact on aggregate demand. And by then, the economic conditions may have changed so much that the policy undertaken is no longer appropriate. So time lags are sort of built into both sides of the fiscal and monetary policy decision. The other thing is that monetary policy is possibly ineffective, or possible ineffectiveness in a recession. And this is where, there's an argument here between neoclassicists and Keynesian views, in that monetary policy can work effectively when it restricts the money supply to fight inflation, but it's difficult to get out of a deep recession. I mean, the only thing you can do is expansionary monetary policy, of course, which is intended to increase aggregate demand by encouraging investment and consumption, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that the banks are going to change their interest rates and that then, therefore, firms are always going to start just like borrowing money like crazy. No, in a recession, people are cautious. And just because you change the interest rates doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be an immediate change to aggregate demand. The third thing is a conflict between government objectives. And what this is saying is that the manipulation of interest rates affects not only the domestic economy, but it also affects the variables in the foreign sector of the economy, such as exchange rates. And if you think back to the connection between exchange rates and interest rates, if interest rates are really low in the US, then people are going to sell their euros, let's say, buy dollars, and that's going to increase the demand for dollars. And that money coming in is going to increase the pressure on the interest rates. But if the Fed increases interest rates, then it's going to have a downward effect on the exchange rate, which might not be good for the economy. And then the last thing is the inability to deal with stagflation. And monetary policy is a demand side policy and is therefore unable to deal effectively with supply side causes of instability, which is similar to fiscal policy. Okay, so there you have it, the strengths, the weaknesses of monetary policy. These are evaluative things you're going to need to know so that you can decide as the economist on the problem that you get what the government should do and which particular tool it should pull out of its toolbox. Should it pull the fiscal policy tool that deals with spending and taxing, or should it pull the monetary policy tool that has to do with interest rates and the money supply? And knowing the strengths and weaknesses of both, of course, is going to inform you and enable you to do that. And so you are an economist. If you got that stuff in your head, I'm telling you, you could go work for the federal government of the United States or any sort of national government around the world because you understand the nuances and subtleties and the interconnectedness of all economies through your studies of economics. It's super cool, my friends, and congratulations on pushing on through. We'll talk to you in a bit.